I didn't care. And it's not like, oh, let me not care in like a healthy way. It was very much like, it doesn't matter what I'm going to make from this. I'm going to survive.
This is Brainard, and he makes over $250,000 a year as a comedian on YouTube and other social platforms. Best known for his viral sketch comedy series, The Table, about how various states in the U.S. are handling current events. Ben has been able to make a thriving business as a comedian where he is in total control of his brand and his revenue. In this episode, we're going to be talking about his original goal and process for making money, starting with video number 1. Overcoming the hurdle of asking your audience for money, his honest breakdown about how the stand-up comedy industry really works, and how he ended up in a no plan B scenario. Ben is going to be giving his honest feelings about making money as a content creator, and it honestly might surprise you. Becoming a full-time YouTuber is the dream, but how can you financially get there? Welcome to The Funded YouTuber, where we sit down with successful YouTubers to dive headfirst into the money-making side of being a full-time YouTuber and creator. We will be breaking down their paths to full-time income, sharing struggles, exposing their victories, and literally mapping out their income streams, how they got them, and what they are working on next. The Funded YouTuber is brought to you by GigaStar. Inspired by YouTubers like you with the vision to fuel human creativity, GigaStar brings creators and investors together. What was your journey to content creation and to YouTube?
Sure. Okay. Well, we go back far enough. I was born and raised in Daytona Beach, Florida, and I went to college for mechanical engineering. I was double minoring in physics and computer design and manufacturing, and I got bored, so I dropped out, joined the Army, moved to Orlando, and oh, I forgot. There was another moment before I got bored and dropped out of college. For about 2 years, I did improv comedy in Daytona Beach, Florida. I found a flyer for a show, went to the show, liked it, and then asked the people afterwards, like, how to get involved. And they were like, oh, just come back on Tuesday. And I was like, okay. It was a very low-key thing and not at all what improv comedy is like, I don't know, anywhere else in the world, really. Okay. But it was Daytona Beach, Florida. So rules, who needs them? And did that for 2 years. College, dropped out, joined the Army, moved to Orlando. And I tried to do improv comedy in Orlando, and everywhere I went was like, no, you have to take our class. So you have to spend like $200 to $400, take our 4 to 6 week class, and then at the end of that, it's like maybe you get a chance to be on the stage. And I didn't like that. I think probably comparatively to what I had known, but I was like, guys, I've been doing this like professionally for 2 years, and they were like, but you haven't done it with us. So I stopped trying to do that. I saw a sign for stand-up comedy, just an open mic comedy night at the Drunken Monkey coffee shop in Orlando, Florida. And I went to one of those, and it was open mic comedy. And so I asked those guys, how do I get involved with this? And they gave me kind of like a list of the mics that were in Orlando, the days of the week, where they were, what time. And I went about a week later to a place called The Other Bar in downtown Orlando. And I was not good. It was not funny. But something went good enough for me to think, oh, I should keep doing this.
All right.
And so I did. And then years later, now this is going to be January of 2020. So I think about 3.5 years later, I decided to go full-time stand-up comedy.
Okay.
I was living with my aunt in Orlando, so I really wasn't paying much as far as like rent, and I didn't really have anything else for like bills and stuff. So I was easily able to pay for my life with like Uber and Lyft. And I decided that I thought I could make enough money every month doing stand-up that I could stop doing Uber and Lyft. And I'm pretty sure I was right, but I never got to find out.
Okay, why?
I was booked every single weekend from January until October of 2020. And then March happened.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I was on my way to start this tour where I was on my way to Atlanta. I was going to do a couple shows in Atlanta and then keep going. And I forget where all the stops were, but basically I ended up out in like Wichita, Kansas. And then I would come down into Texas and then back across I-10 into Florida. And I had a ton of shows over like 3 or 4 weeks. And I'm about an hour outside of Atlanta. I get a call going, hey, man, we have to cancel your shows. Like, everything's shut down.
Yeah.
And then I looked at my emails, and all of my next shows after that were starting to get canceled too. So I had to stop. I ate my feelings in a cookout parking lot, and then I drove back to Orlando. And that is when I started using TikTok.
Okay. So what did you start making on TikTok?
Anything I thought that I could make funny.
Okay.
My idea was to just use TikTok as like a way to keep that muscle active, the writing and the comedy muscle active. And
Mhm.
so I was doing a sketch every single day of quarantine. And at that point, when you're doing like a full minute of an original sketch every single day, you're just kind of like anything you think of where you're like, I think I can make this funny. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
I think this is probably a connection. Day 13 was the first day I did my first like viral-esque video where I dressed up as the states of America, sat down at a table and really just talked about how nobody's doing well. And that blew up. So I did another one and then that blew up. And then I was like, I guess I'm just going to keep doing this until people stop.
Mhm. Okay, so how did you then go from TikTok to YouTube? Like where and why did that transition happen?
So when it happened was pretty much immediately. I think maybe a week or two after, it might even not have been different timing at all. I have always posted on all of the platforms. And
Okay.
so I've been posting my sketches on YouTube since before they even had shorts. What I was doing was I would write about a minute and 7 seconds worth of sketch. And this was before TikTok allowed more than 59 seconds. So I'd write an extra 6 or 7 seconds and I would post the full thing on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And I would
Mm.
tell people on TikTok, hey, if you want an extra punchline, if you want an extra 6 seconds, go to Instagram.
Okay, nice.
And I grew my Instagram following from, marginal to I think 120,000 before they even introduced Reels.
Okay.
And YouTube was about the same.
Because YouTube at the time also didn't have shorts yet when you had started
Right.
doing it. Because shorts was like an answer to TikTok, and that also has a 59 seconds limitation. So it's like when TikTok allowed for more, YouTube came on and only is allowed 59 seconds still to like the time we
Yep.
recorded this. Like that's the limitation still. So how are you able to then like craft your videos to post all the platforms but stay within the restriction?
I spent a long time figuring out how to do this.
Okay.
Originally, when everything was just under a minute or roughly a minute,
Mhm.
because the reason I needed to do at least a minute is because Facebook at the time monetized the videos that were over a minute.
Yes.
So I needed to do
Remember.
at least a minute. And now I do 3 minutes because Facebook does mid-roll ads at 3 minutes. And so it's been like that for a long time. And so what I eventually ended up doing in the beginning, it was just I would write 59 seconds that was good standalone, and then I would write an extra punchline. So even if you didn't see that extra punchline, it was still very funny and felt complete. There was just an extra thing. And now I try to keep I write about 3 1-minute sketches.
Mm.
So my goal is to write 3 standalone 1-minute things that when you watch them together, it flows. But if you watch them separately, it still makes sense.
Okay. So it sounds like what you're saying is that your comedy delivery, like your sketch like formula that you created was based around qualifying for creator funds. Is that accurate to
Yes.
say? Okay. So
100%.
so was that like where your income started coming in from being a content creator?
Yes. I'm trying to remember. I diversified very, very quickly. I started a Patreon pretty early on, and right now we're at, I think, 850 or more subs on my Patreon. But it's been pretty steadily high since like even the beginning of it. But yeah, I think my goal, the very first goal I had as a content creator was figuring out how to achieve and activate, pay passive income from these things. So I had already been monetized on Facebook before this
Okay.
because posting comedy and all that. So Facebook, I think, was the first one that started paying me. And then, yeah, I did the Patreon and I had made merch as well. So
Okay.
I was probably making more money from Patreon and merch than I was from these platforms. But I started making money from these platforms pretty early on. Like within probably 6 months of my first viral video, I was making enough money through those platforms to pay my small expenses of like rent and bills.
Yeah, so like from the creator funds or from all three of those income streams?
From the creator funds.
Okay, so I would think it's fair to say like your first taste of being of income did come from those creator funds. When did it feel like as a creator like you could have a sustainable income? Like what were the income streams? What was the dollar amounts you were looking for? The follower count you were out? Like what was happening for you in those kinds of ways for you to determine if it was going to be sustainable or not?
I think this is where this interview is going to start becoming rather peculiar.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
I didn't care. And it's not like, oh, let me not care in like a healthy way. It was very much like, it doesn't matter what I'm going to make from this. I'm going to survive. I'm a very cross that bridge when I get there kind of person. I think the most I did was be like, oh, I need to make this much money every month to pay my bills. But at no point was I like, if I make this much money, then I can do this. Or if I make this much money, then I can do this. It was like, even if I make $0 this month, I will find out how to survive. And it's not even like a worry in my brain where I was like, I'll figure it out. It was like, there wasn't even a sliver of a doubt that I would figure out how to get through it was just like, okay.
I love this. I'm obsessed with this answer because I have talked with so many creators that are like, I need this subscriber count, I need this dollar amount, I need to have this in savings, all this kind of stuff. And the reason I love your response to this is because this is how I had to become a creator. So my husband was in the Air Force and I had a ticking clock. So when he was going to be getting out, and I had to be able to replace his income, which is more than just like the dollars and cents that she gets from a paycheck. It's also like what we get from our medical and from life insurance and the
Yeah, there's
housing and stuff.
a
Like,
lot of benefits that come with the military.
yeah, it's more like it's pay that like you don't ever see that. So like if you're going as a kid and all this thing, like you don't realize it. There's a lot of complications in it, and I don't want to
There's a
go
lot
into
of
that.
money that you
Sure.
don't have to spend.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to account for all that. And so we had planned out, in addition to that, though, I also have two kids, right? And so I had a husband, two kids. I'm like, okay, I have to replace this man's income and like our household budgets to cover things. And like, I don't have the luxury of being able to be like, okay, I need this dollar amount in order to get there. It was literally, you figure this out or your family goes hungry. And I was like, okay.
Right.
And so I did figure it out. And like YouTube was a very big central part of like how I was doing that, because I was not only getting AdSense, but I was also able to like have affiliates and sponsorship deals. And I was getting speaking, and I was all of these things that came from it. And so being able to like, it was literally a make or break situation. It was
Yeah.
not let me figure out how to make this sustainable. It had to be.
I forgot that I had done this. I've been keeping track of how much money I've made by like separated categorically by like platforms since April of 2020.
Awesome. That's really cool. Okay, so do we get to see this, or are you gonna like keep it from you? Give me an idea about it.
I can tell you the first time I made money from a platform. So in April, the only money I made was from merch sales and donations. I believe my website had just a button where people could donate to me if they wanted.
Oh, okay.
In May is when I made my Patreon. And so I made $2,000 from Patreon in the first month that I had that.
Nice.
In June is when I got my first platform check, and that was YouTube.
Okay.
So I made $4,000 from Patreon, and I made $2,000 from YouTube.
Okay. And I would think even for some people that would be enough for them to be able to sustain and grow and save as well, especially because I know from you, just because I know you, you don't have like a spouse or kids and things like that you also have
Right.
this like obligation to care for.
Right. Yeah. No, I've kept my life free and easy as much as I could.
I want to talk about your Patreon for a second, because I want to know what was the value you were giving to your patrons that made them want to join, and how also were you funneling your audience to Patreon so that you could get these income streams?
Those are both really good questions.
You don't have an answer, do you?
Absolutely not. No. I give my Patreon people my content a day early.
Okay.
And then I think at some point I was giving them like a small discount on my online store
Mm-hmm. So do you think it was they were just doing because they liked your content and wanted to support you?
Absolutely. And I tell this to people all the time. About 75% of the people who subscribe onto like a Patreon, something like that, about 75% of them are there simply to support you. They are never going to check it. They're going to forget that it's there, but they're happy to give you that money, which is a big hurdle, I think. That one's a bigger hurdle to get over than not making money because you need to make money. And so that's like, you need this to live. But asking people for money is a much bigger hurdle than needing to get money. You oftentimes don't feel like what you're offering them in return, in exchange for their money, is worth the money that you're asking. And maybe this isn't true for everyone, but this is true for me and several of my other friends who did content creation around the same time, where it was like, I don't feel like I should be asking for money right now. But people don't care. They're just happy to support you, and if they can, they will. And then the other 25% of people who subscribe to your Patreon that aren't there just to support you will never be satisfied, and you should never give them what they want.
Okay, you're gonna have to elaborate on that 25% one a little bit for us. What do you mean?
I mean, it just goes back to that old saying of you can't please all the people all the time. And the 25% of people that are not there simply to support you, and of course, these numbers are just general, but the smaller percentage of people that aren't there simply to support you value their money more than you.
Oh, okay.
And they will keep asking and keep asking and keep asking. And when you finally say no, they're going to be like, but look at all this money I've sent you. And if you don't have a healthy relationship with money, I believe that money's not real. I cannot be bought. If someone ever said, look at all this money I sent you, I would have said, thanks for the money. But if you're not going to be here for a reason other than so that you can make me do the things that you want, you can go now because I'm not going to do the things that you want.
There's this saying that's like your least paying customer is always the biggest pain in the butt. They like, well, I'm giving you something. I demand the world of you. And I can see that happening because like when it comes to Patreon and stuff, it's almost like people are paying for access, like this extra layer and stuff. And so if you can have people that would expect more than they are paying for that you're even offering. And I think
Mhm.
that there's a level with creators where like we want to give to them because we want to keep our audience happy because we're afraid of bad comments and people not liking us. But there's still that line. And I think that your definition and perspective is very helpful for breaking that down.
Absolutely. I think I have a fairly healthy perspective on stuff like that. I think I've come a long way as far as like my comfortability in engaging with my audience. I used to
Mhm.
be very much like they get what I give them. And in a way, I still am that kind of creator, but
Mhm.
it's a little bit less of that. In my perspective as a creator, you should be a majority, they get what I give them, and a minority, I listen to what they're saying to me.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's good balance. You're doing this content creator thing through COVID and you're having a lot of success with it through these different income streams from creator funds, from AdSense, from your Patreon, and from merch. When are you able to expand into other things? I said you're a comedian. At some point in time, I'm presuming your goal is to get back on stage, right? So how
Yep.
did that other income stream happen and that plan happen for you?
So, according to my spreadsheet, the first stand up show that I did since COVID started was in August.
Of what?
And
2020?
yep,
Okay.
I was living in Florida. So,
Yeah, the rules were quite
yeah,
limited.
exactly. I remember it being a show that I had booked since before COVID. And it just
Oh,
happened
wow.
to be one of those things where like they just kept holding off and kept holding off and kept holding off. And eventually they were like, we're in the clear, let's run it. And I made $225 from that show.
Okay.
I think it was a few shows, actually.
Okay, you're gonna have to
And
explain to us why it's so low. I don't want to say bad. Why is that pay so bad
oh,
for
because
something
Florida
that you're
hasn't
making
raised
thousands and
rates for
thousands?
entertainers since the 80s.
Oh my god.
If you host a show in Florida, you're getting $25, maybe $50. If you are featuring, which means you're doing 20 to 30 minutes in the middle of a show, you're getting $75. And if you're headlining, you're getting $150. Now, the other thing is that pay does not necessarily go up all that much in different parts of the country. Like in
Hmm.
California, it's about double, where you'll get very specific parts of California. If you're doing Los Angeles, you're probably not even going to get a feature spot. There's no room for more than 10 minutes at one time. But if you're doing like clubs in California, you'll get $150 to feature and $300 to headline.
Okay, okay, all right, we're gonna be doing a little time travel here because we're jumping ahead because I know you tour now very actively.
Yes.
How are you making this financially worth it for you? Because you're going all over the place. How are you making money doing this?
So I'll say it more like this. Stand-up comedy does not pay well until it does.
Okay,
The money you get from stand-up does not gradually increase at a certain point. Sure, it
okay,
does when you like you're just beginning to the headline, and if you hit hard, you could do a show like every single night of the week, which is how I was doing it in 2020, where I wasn't making much money per show, but I was just doing an insane amount of shows, and I was sleeping in my car at nighttime security rest stops on the highway. But now I don't get a flat rate for a show. I get a percentage of ticket sales.
okay.
Once you become a person that can bring people out, you can start negotiating not a flat rate, but just give me 60, 70, 80% of the ticket sale.
Okay. Okay. I'm guessing you also bring your merch and sell it there too and plug people to go to your Patreon as well.
Exactly. Yeah. The merch has always been a thing where if you can sell enough merch after a show to cover travel expenses, then suddenly your show check itself becomes just green.
Okay. I love that. I love that. Okay. So to rewind a little back into like the scope of like your creator career, essentially, what is a horrible money experience that you have had to deal with?
I don't know.
You don't have any? Money's just been
I'm sure I
great for
do.
you?
No, it has nothing to do with how great things have been, but I'll say more along the lines of the things that were bad in my life, I never attributed to the fact that I don't have money.
Okay.
Like when I was a kid, I grew up poor. Like I didn't, my parents didn't have dinner some nights so that the kids could eat, right? Like I didn't grow up wealthy or well off by any stretch of the imagination, but I also don't believe money is real. So if you're asking like, hey, what's a bad financial situation? It wasn't a bad financial situation for me. It was just a bad situation that I'm sure could have been made better with money, but I didn't have it, so I didn't think about it.
Fair. What is your most successful financial situation or moment to date?
Probably the first time that I got approved for renting a house in Los Angeles.
Good one. Like so for you it was like a personal money accomplishment being able to qualify and to get something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even so much a personal thing. It was validation in the eyes of people who believe money is real. Because when you are, applying for houses and rent and stuff, like they require an insane amount of proof that you can pay for your pudding.
Mhm.
So, and I didn't have with entertainment, I didn't have like pay stubs that I could hand people. I had to give them like 6 months worth of printed out bank account statements to
Mm.
prove that I had money at all. And they require like three times you're supposed to make like three times the amount of rent every month, which is just an insane thing to ask anybody. You're supposed to have a certain amount in your bank account already. Like that first month's rent is going to be first, last, and security deposit. Like you need a lot of money, just period, in order to have stability in housing. And I got denied a lot of places because they wouldn't accept the bank statements or because they just didn't believe that there was any stability in the entertainment industry. So the first time that somebody was like, "Yeah, here are the keys," I was like, "Cool." That was probably like a moment that I could look at and be like, "Here's a distinct time where it was proven that I had enough money to be."
B.
I was gonna end that sentence differently, but it sounded good there.
Okay, no, I'm here for that. That's good. Good ending. Okay. All right, let's talk about your income stream. So we have broken down your income streams. You have 7 income streams currently. So you have 17% of your income comes from AdSense, and then you have 5% coming from creator funds, another 17% from membership, 6% from merch, And 52% of your income comes from live events and workshops, and 3% comes from other. I am totally blown away by the fact that over half of your income comes from live events and workshops. And I'm guessing that that is more recent than before because you've been doing more touring, you're more popular on these platforms that's allowed for you to be an attraction.
Yes. And just to prove that more or less, I just went back. I keep all of my stuff just on a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I copy and pasted the equation I did to get those percentages into my 2020 income page.
Okay.
And in 2020, my live events were 32% of my income.
Before we move on, as a creator, we're always working towards like what we're doing next and like having plans and futures. What is your next financial move?
So I just made a podcast. We're on episode like 3 or 4 right now. And I think the podcast alone is one thing that could make money just because of the same ways that I've made money across all of the other places. But you can also fit a lot of advertising space inside of a podcast. So that's a good money maker there. 2, I pitched an hour of comedy to Netflix recently. So waiting on that. Even if they say no, I'm going to produce it myself anyway. 3, I have been writing a couple source books for D&D 5e. So once those books get written, I'm going to look into publishing and I'll be able to sell those as well.
How does
and then I'm trying to make bigger video stuff like TV series-esque type things, but that's a much longer process.
Yeah, I'm curious just because all the other stuff made sense. They said D&D. How does the D&D book part connect to your comedy part? Is it just I like it, so I'm going to do it, even though it does nothing to do with comedy?
Yep,
doing it for you.
Everyone should have a hobby.
Yeah, agree. My new hobby is D&D too, so that's why I'm also a big fan of this as well. Okay, so I would really love to get like your perspective and advice for our listeners who are trying to figure out this whole YouTuber creator income thing. What are your thoughts on the best way to get started to earning your first, like building out your first income stream, and then what your advice is to getting to sustainable?
The best advice I can give you is to just do it. Okay. Most people don't create because they didn't get over the hump of making their first thing. The best advice I can give to somebody who's just trying to start out is to not even try to think about how these platforms will pay you money. Because at the end of the day, if you are doing something to make money, then that means you are not doing something because it brings you joy. And if it doesn't bring you joy, it won't bring anybody else joy. And if you're not bringing anybody else joy, then you won't make money from it.
Vicious loop. I have to kind of like devil's advocate on this one because I got started as a creator as a path for making money. I became a creator because I needed to get leads to my service-based business. Like that's how like that sure. Like connection. I do love creating content. It's like as a creative myself, it's a great I want to create as much as possible and help people as much as possible. But I would feel like at some point people along the creator journey, the YouTuber journey, aren't able to continue without income. And so how does that bridge happen? How can we create and then get to the point of making money if like we're creating great things that we love, but we can't get to where we want to go or elevate to where we want to go or do what we want to do until we can make some money from it to justify it, to fund it, to allow for it to be successful?
That's a great question. And I'm not the one to ask. Nobody is the one to ask. There's no one answer for that. And I don't even know if there is an answer for that. Mm-hmm. I made money because I tried everything. And I saw what worked, not only just for me, but also for me in that very specific situation that I was in that nobody else could possibly be in because it was my situation. The things that I did that worked for me in 2020 will not work for me right now. And the things that worked for me now wouldn't have worked for me in 2020. Mm-hmm. There's so much to it, and the chaos of the universe does not allow for the same thing to work twice for any two people. And if it does, it only did because you think that it did, not because it actually did. So in that case, the best advice I can give is just the most vague and general piece of advice, which is try everything.
I think that's fair. That's your experience, it's your advice, and that's, I think, the best way for us to wrap up for today. I am so grateful for you sharing where you have been, the journey you've been on, how you've made money, and what that has looked like, because not every journey, like you had said, is the same. And so it's really good. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
The Funded YouTuber is brought to you by GigaStar, a parent company of GigaStar Market, an SEC-registered funding portal, and member of FINRA. Learn more at gigastar.io. Music provided by APM Music, unrivaled music to bring your stories to life. Neither GigaStar nor its affiliated companies provide legal, regulatory, financial, or tax advice. Any opinions expressed herein are those of the authors and are the informational purposes only. The information and opinions expressed herein are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investments, objectives, financial situation, or needs of any specific investors.